Welcome back to Photoshop. It is week 3 in this class, the start of week 4 in your other classes, but since it's a Monday, we're a little off. We're going to be starting on chapter 3, and you're going to learn about the basic and most necessary tools that you need to understand for selections, and you need to know how to do this manually before you take advantage of some of the built-in features. So the first thing we're going to start with is the selection tool. So we're just going to launch a new document in Photoshop. And I am in either the photo or print options. It doesn't really matter. But we're just going to go with basically a blank document. So I'm going to choose the letter document, but I'm going to make it wide, landscape orientation, and say create. So we're going to get a large white document. I'm going to just close that history window and zoom out a little bit so you can see my entire canvas here. All right, the tools we're going to learn today are the Marquee tools, and they're second in your toolbar. We have the rectangular marquee, the elliptical, a single row, and a single column. And we're going to start with excuse me, allergies are fired up. Start with a rectangular marquee. So choose that one. And remember I told you that any tool you pick, this option bar is going to be changed to be specific to that tool. So we see that we're in the rectangular marquee, and then we see that we have some options up here that we're going to talk about in a little bit. The default is this first one. We see we have feathering, style. We're going to just leave it as is. And we're going to see how these tools work. So if you shift and drag out, you are making whatever shape as a rectangle that you want. You do see the tooltip over there, but what you're really making is not a shape. You are making a selection, meaning marching ants, that's what we call these. Whatever pixels are inside of them or underneath them are the ones that you're actually selecting. So if this were an actual picture, like, try to show you one quickly, if there is such a thing as quickly on my slow computer. Okay, finally have a picture up here. When I make a rectangular marquee, all I'm doing is literally targeting the pixels underneath here. This is a single background layer, so there's not much I can do to it, but if I were to try to copy that and paste it somewhere, it's only going to pick up the pixels inside of this marching ant, nothing else. So that's why it's called selection. Back in our blank example here, we can see that it's just targeted these pixels, which are currently blank. So we would want to fill them or do something with them. But before we do that, let's learn more about how these tools can work, because we just made a rectangle. I just clicked away to stop that. To make it proportionately a perfect rectangle, which is also called a square, whenever we hold the Shift key, we're going to get perfect symmetry. So if you want to make a square, you use the rectangle marquee tool, and then you just drag out by holding the Shift key to get the perfect square. If you hold the Option key only when you're dragging, wherever your cursor starts is the middle point, and your shape will grow from the center out. So before, if we started at the top left, we dragged over and to the right and down. That's the way it worked. When you hold the Option key, it goes from the center out. So you can guess if you were to hold Option and Shift, you'd make a perfect square from the center out. Let's go back to our toolbar and hold the flyout menu and get the elliptical marquee tool. Again, just like the name says, you're making ellipses. How narrow, wide, whatever is up to you. If you hold the Shift key when you do this, you get a perfect circle. If you hold Option and Shift, you get a perfect circle from the inside out. You can only have one selection at a time unless you're holding some modifiers. So that's why when I click away, that selection goes away and it's ready for me to make another one. So there can only be one marching ant at a time unless we do something special, and I'll show you that in just a minute. So to test these selections, we're going to show you what they really mean, how this is the boundary. I'd like you to go to your color swatches down here. So we have our foreground color and our background color. And click on the foreground color and switch it to a color of your choice, not black or white. So I'm over here in this bright blue family right now. I'm sorry, I'm doing that maybe too fast. You move these double arrows up and down to get to the color family you'd like, and then once you're happy with that, you select inside of here a tint or a shade of that color. So I'm getting more true blues, darker blues, lighter blues, whatever. So visually you can just click and find what you're looking for. All right, when you have the color you want, you simply say okay, and then you'll notice that that is the color swatch that is loaded in your foreground color. So we're gonna do some painting with that. And by doing that, we're going to see that it is held within those marching ants. That's the boundary that it is kept inside. So evidently I lost my selection. Oh, there it is again. Good. We're going to come down to the brush tool. You can always push the letter B on your keyboard. That's a shortcut to get you to the brush tool. And then this will show you what your default tool is. I have a soft edged 125 pixel brush right now, and I can see visually how big that is based on my cursor. And it really doesn't matter how big it is or what brush it is. You're going to see how this marquee selection works. So start outside of it and draw through here with a color. And what you're going to see is that it only shows up inside the boundaries of your marching ants. So we're limiting our selection to just inside of this shape. So we could do this 100 times. We could use a bigger brush to try to fill it in, or if our goal was to make this all blue, we would use some keyboard shortcuts, because we can choose to fill this shape. I'm not going to call it a shape. Fill this selection with our foreground color or our background color. Option Delete on your keyboard will fill with your foreground color. Command Delete will fill with your background color, and my background is white, so it's going to come back to white. Had that been a yellow background, it would have been yellow. If you ever forget which is which, you aren't going to hurt anything. Worst case scenario, you choose the wrong one first. You try a Command Delete and you go, oh shoot, that's white. I need to do Option Delete to get my foreground color. So that's a quick way to fill or dump color into your selection using keyboard shortcuts. All right, let's just click. Actually, I'm going to deselect that because it's quite big. And I think I need some more room on my workspace here. Notice that this put it all on the background. It's not like a layer floating above it. So I'm just going to go back to an empty slate. So I'm going to do Edit, and where is Revert? File. Honestly, some days I feel like things are different from, oh, it's grayed out, probably because it's a background layer. Darn it. All right, then we're going to do Window, and we're going to come down to History, and this is going to show us everything we've done, all the steps we've taken, from making things, deselecting, to using the brush tool, to filling. I'm just going to go all the way back to New, which gets me to absolutely nothing, a background layer with nothing on it. From here, we're going to look at some of the settings in this bar up here. So if we go back to the rectangle, and we notice that where it says feather, 0 pixels. So if we make a rectangle and fill it with our foreground color, Option Delete, and then deselect it, Command D, just to get the marching ants to go away. I'm going to zoom in, so Command plus or Control plus if you're on a PC, or use the zoom tool or whatever it is that you want to do. We're going to zoom in on the edges of this. Remember, if you need the hand tool, the shortcut is just to hold down the space bar, and then you can bring this back in. So I can see that this is a perfectly crisp edge, and because this is a straight line, it works perfectly with lighting up pixels, which are these squares of color. They're easy to light up and keep a straight edge. I'm going to do a Command 0 to get back to my full size here. Now let's try a marquee, a rectangular marquee, but we're going to do some feathering. So change that feathering number to 30. Draw out your rectangle, and when you let go, you notice it kind of gets rounded corners, and you didn't tell it to be a rounded rectangle marquee. That doesn't exist. Let's fill it with color, Option Delete, and then turn off our marching ants, Command D to deselect. This is what feather looks like. It gives you a softer edge, and basically the 30 pixels is I told it to go from a solid fill to nothing over the course of 30 pixels. So as we zoom in, we start to see, these are not pixels, these are just the grid system, but we start to see how it's changing colors of blue and getting lighter and lighter. So I just right-clicked and chose Fit on Screen for that one because I was in the Zoom tool. So that makes sense, but let's look at a circle. Let's go to our elliptical marquee. Make sure this is 0, no feather at all. And notice that anti-alias is not turned on. Let's make a perfect circle, so Shift and drag, and then fill it with our foreground color, Command Delete, or Option Delete if you're not paying attention like I wasn't. And I'm going to turn off the marching ants, Command D to deselect, and I'm going to zoom in. And what we're going to see is some really strange effects going on because we're trying to show a round circle. There is no way to make a rounded edge. It can't connect these like Illustrator does and make a rounded edge. It has to light up a squared pixel incomplete. So it starts to stair step them, hoping that from a distance it looks okay. And maybe it does, at least at a certain zoom it looks okay. But let's go back and use that same tool, but turn on the anti-alias. This should be on by default when you're making ellipses and circles. It probably was turned off because I was previously screwing around with it, but it's probably the default behavior for this tool. So as we make our circle, so shift and drag a perfect circle, and then, that's not what I want to do. Let me get you about that big and move you over. So what I did was once I had the shape, the size I wanted, I let go of the shift key and I'm holding down the space bar to kind of move this over. I'm just moving it closer to this one so we can compare edges. You don't have to. Wherever you place your circle is fine. So with the anti-alias on, Option Delete to fill it with that same color. Turn off your marching ants by deselecting Command D. And now I'm going to zoom in to show you the difference. Do you see how already this looks much more pleasing? We don't see the jagged edges that we do here, but we know that it has to light up a square. It has to be. So how are they accomplishing this? Well, as we zoom in, we notice that what anti-aliasing does is this is the original color that we want, but then it takes a pixel or two of lighter shades and tints and pushes them to the edge. So it added a little bit of white and a little bit more white. This one's got a lot of white in it, but because of that, from a zoomed out position, it looks really smooth, even at this point, which is a 300% zoom. So we tend to always have the anti-alias button checked when we're working with circles.